All right, y'all. We are live. Proof of Workforce. We're live. The place where workers and wage earners grab Bitcoin signal. Sunnyvale Public Safety Officers Association is here to Bitcoin. They're the first dual agency association to add Bitcoin to the balance sheet. We'll break down what that means. Unions are finding Bitcoin. What are the states up to? Strategy announces a massive stack plan. We're going to break down what's happening in the world of workers, pension funds, and nation states. So punch your time cards, clock in. This is Proof of Workforce Live. Alemo here, out of the bullpen. Where are you at? What is up?
What's
How you doing?
what's on the great state of New Jersey, the Garden State here, reporting live. Happy to be here, Dom. How have you been? How was your weekend?
Oh, good, man. Just filled with proof of work, right? Like always, we need to get the Jersey unions on board. We'll see if Jersey Mike's can help us with that strategy. Let's get right into the action. Sunnyvale Public Safety Officers Association announced today that they became the first dual safety association in the U.S. to add Bitcoin to the balance sheet. There it is, just in Sunnyvale, California. Public safety officers adopt a Get Off Zero initiative, becoming the first police and fire. Alemo, these are, for those that don't know, these are police officers and firefighters in one frame. They do both. So in their trunk, they got SWAT gear and firefighter bunker gear right next to each other.
Do they run into fires with Glocks on their hip? Like, is that how that works? Or
I mean, I guess it would depend on the report coming from the fire, but kind of all purpose there, very on brand with Bitcoin, right? If you're going to run into a chaotic situation, you got to have a tool that serves all aspects of what you may encounter. So, pretty huge. Wyoming Highway Patrol kicked the door down only, I would say, like a couple weeks ago, and real shortly after the Sunnyvale Public Safety Officers Association. They're just over 200 members. They're out of Sunnyvale, California. Their membership formally adopted by rank and file vote this measure to get off zero. So unbelievable. And this is also, I think it's in Ro Khanna's district. So there's some synergy there between, elected folks and grassroots union adoption.
that's awesome. Yeah, it's cool to see the adoption. Bitcoin's price grows, although we're down right now, but adoption is spreading as well.
Yeah, we're taking a little bit of a beating right now, but remember, adoption rolls on. I looked at the price. I think last year at this time we were just under 70K. So a little retracement here, but it's the long game that matters. And let's not forget Bitcoin's properties as a tool that really aligns with unions and stuff like that. With that said, why are unions finding Bitcoin? And I saw a clip from the old it was the RNC conference last year where Sean O'Brien, he's the president of one of the largest unions in the country, the Teamsters. He had a little something to say about like the state of unions where they're at, and so let's pull that up real quick because I think it really gives you an idea of why unions are finding Bitcoin.
Working people know our system is broken. The elites are not laboring on behalf of workers. There is a political caste system that prevents citizens from accessing their representatives to hold them accountable. For a moment in time, working people in America were seen as essential. Sadly, it took a global pandemic for political and corporate elites to notice this fact. But ask yourself this question. Since the end of the pandemic, when was the last time you heard major news outlets regularly refer to workers as essential? You haven't. The men and women who provide goods and services, deliver packages, stock grocery shelves, care for patients, pick up your trash, and keep our communities safe are taken for granted. All the while, the stock market booms, housing prices hit record highs, and corporate salaries skyrocket. But the income of everyday Americans are shrinking in the face of inflation. At the gas pumps, at the grocery store, with the electrical bill, and with the car insurance. This has got to change.
So interesting throwback there to Sean O'Brien's talk. And Alemo, I mean, if you didn't know any better, you would think Sean O'Brien's a Bitcoiner. I mean, these are we talk about values in common between unions and Bitcoin and workforce orgs. I mean, he's talking about a system where you lack access to the political, decision makers. He's talking about income getting beaten down by inflation. And again, if you look at a salary in 2020 from then to now, 24% conservatively, if you didn't get a 24% raise from 2020 to now, you took a pay cut. And that's conservative. That doesn't include energy, housing, and certain items that have been eliminated. So I don't know, Alemo, no surprise when you hear kind of that mentality that unions are finding Bitcoin and sorting out how to use it for the benefit of their members.
Yeah, no, and Dom, adding to that, if you're doing a 24% raise, it's not like, oh, like the 24% raise is just to keep up. So even if you got that, you're not doing any better than you were 5 years ago. And things were tough 5 years ago when the pandemic was happening, when the chaos was ensuing. So yeah, obviously, if you're not getting a 24% raise, you're falling behind. And even if you did, you're break even. So you're not any better than you were in 2020 if times were tough then. Adding to that, basically, like we say, Bitcoin is proof of work. Workers are proof of work. You're using your time and labor in order to get a salary. And obviously, when you're using fiat dollars, it's guaranteed to debase. There's no question about it. Like, you are losing purchasing power over time if you're holding it in fiat currency, or even if people, I feel terrible. And there's many Americans, I'd say like upwards of 50% of Americans that live paycheck to paycheck. If you're living paycheck to paycheck and your time is getting devalued because the dollar is getting devalued, there's no way to keep up, and you have to cut costs. Either you have to use less preferable goods, like, you can no longer eat steak, you have to eat chicken. If you're eating chicken, you have to go even lower than that. So you're getting less quality of food, you're getting less housing, you're getting less of a car or auto. So if your car breaks, it's hard to repair, you have to get a worse car. So it just kind of rolls downhill in terms of how bad things get. But if you're on a Bitcoin standard powered by proof of work, you're ordered to able to increase your purchasing power over time. There's a great website called pricedinbitcoin21.com that shows if you're saving in Bitcoin, and on the year to year, month to month, you can be down. As you can see, we're down a couple percent in Bitcoin right now. But if you're using that website, you can price things more appropriately in Bitcoin, and over 3, 4, 5, even longer terms, it shows that everything's falling in value. It means that you're getting more of your purchasing power with Bitcoin over time, which is great.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting, Alemo, you said lower than chicken. I mean, we're talking, it starts to get creative. Like, you might be talking, I don't know, lower than chicken. But yeah, it does take some discipline, right? And there has to be some long-term savings strategy with Bitcoin, without a doubt. And we know, like, being realistic, you can be down. If you bought Bitcoin, a few months ago, you're down right now. So you're like, what are these guys talking about? They're saying things priced down in Bitcoin. I'm not seeing that. I have this stack. You have to have a long-term strategy. And until proven otherwise, Bitcoin has shown that it will outpace the loss of purchasing power of the dollar. It's until proven otherwise, that is a lock. And it has been, that's Bitcoin's brand, the resilience there. So short term, who knows what's going on. Speaking of short term, let's look at the states real quick. I've seen a lot of stuff out there on the state race to Bitcoin, including a lot of posts of like, oh, the state has adopted, Texas is the first, or Utah passed their measure, so they're the first. Let's start with Utah. Let's pull up one of the final versions of the bill, which was HB 230. Just so you guys know, remember, anytime you see a headline, go ahead and double check the source document. So Utah did pass its blockchain and digital innovation bill, but it scrapped. As you can see in blue there, it scrapped the authorization for the state treasurer to invest certain public funds in qualifying digital assets. So Utah did, you're seeing headlines like Utah passed their strategic reserve. Well, they amended and scrapped the Treasury reserve aspect of the bill. So that was removed. Still a bill that's chocked full of good gains for Bitcoin, but Utah killed as far as the strategic reserve. They are not in the action. Again, we've talked about on the show, Alemo, Texas seems to be they weren't the furthest along, but that's where I would put my bet on the state most likely to adopt. Let's pull up the comment from the Texas governor and just look at that real quick. So, Texas bill is awaiting approval from the House. Just understand that if you're seeing headlines, but it's looking very good. The Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick said he talked about I promise to make Texas a Bitcoin reserve a priority to solidify Texas's leadership in the digital age. Today, the Senate delivered on that promise by passing SB 21 with bipartisan votes to create the Texas Bitcoin Reserve. Refers to it as digital gold. So that's showing a lot of the fact that it's bipartisan in Texas, that there's a lot of organic bottom up adoption, that there's industry is massive for Texas. And I genuinely think Texas is going to be the first to a strategic reserve. What are your thoughts, Alemo?
I think so. Yeah, I agree with that. There's been a lot of great work done on the ground for trying to get states to adopt Bitcoin. But I find it funny. Dom, I actually want your opinion on this. Donald J. Trump coming over the top and be like, "Gah." Like, the federal government's putting Bitcoin on their balance sheet first. Everyone, there was this race of like, oh, which state's going to adopt first? It's, it doesn't look like the strategic Bitcoin reserve is going to happen. The first couple months happened. It said it was going to be in the first 100 days. He hasn't talked much about it. And then all of a sudden, Trump, great. He used a great quote from an American patriot and hero, Ricky Bobby. If you ain't first, you're last. And he said, we're going to be first. So obviously he can compete with El Salvador, talk to Nayib Bukele about if he's the first nation state or not. That's, not up for debate. They are obviously first, but he wanted to be the first in terms of the government to go into Bitcoin, obviously. So what are your thoughts on that he kind of beat him to the punch? Because it looked like we had like 10 states lined up to be there first.
Yeah. My thoughts is that it's insane because again, when we're getting some leapfrog things that the strategic reserve executive order leapfrogged 50 states in the union doing taking action on a strategic reserve. That's not the way you think of the way government works, right? Individuals, organizations like your churches, your unions, your groups and interest groups. Then you have your institutions. Then you have your state, your city adoption and state adoption. And then the nation that's made up of 50 states, jumps into a reserve. No. They just leapfrogged all of that and they went straight to a strategic reserve. So what's going to happen now is you have kind of two waves. You have the bottom up wave and a top down wave that are coming, they're looking to meet each other all over the map. And so it will create and spur. If you're Texas right now, you're like, damn, how did the US beat us? It brings up all this PTSD from the Alamo. You start going throwback to all kinds of stuff. And they're like, how'd they beat us? We got to get on this. I think more states will come through. Another state, New Hampshire, we have a clip, and New Hampshire is looking to justify their case for a strategic reserve. So let's play that real quick.
Welcome back to Close Up. Some state reps are working to put the New Hampshire Treasury on the cutting edge of digital assets and the world of cryptocurrency. This last week, the House Commerce Committee voted almost unanimously to approve HB 302. The legislation would allow the state treasurer to invest up to 5% of total public funds in digital assets. Advocates are trying to ease any fears about risk to tax dollars, saying the bill only allows investment in those digital assets above a very high threshold of market capitalization.
So there's a market capitalization, an annual market capitalization of $500 billion, so half of a trillion. So for a digital asset to be considered by the treasurer under this bill, it would have to have at least a market cap of $500 billion in the previous year. So that sets a very high threshold for, it's not meme coins, it's not, tokens that people are playing with. It's serious digital assets that companies and countries are considering putting on the balance sheet, including the United States government.
And that ball is now rolling. On Thursday, President Trump signed an executive order establishing a government reserve of Bitcoin. Right now, the only digital asset with a market capitalization of more than $500 billion is Bitcoin. If this becomes law, the bill would also enable the state treasurer to invest public dollars in precious metals such as platinum, silver, and gold.
That's that wrap. So Alemo, close to home, dude. They're knocking on Jersey's door. I think it's Jersey City Mayor. Is it Falop? Is that his name? Falop?
I'm not familiar because I don't live in that area, but I think so.
I remember, I think a year ago, he came out saying like 6 months, hey, I want Jersey City Pension to look into Bitcoin. And he's got to catch up. New Hampshire's knocking on the door, maybe looking to be, the first out of the East Coast. But it's coming to a state near you, Alemo. What do you think? That's hometown right there.
Yeah, no, it would be dope. I guess I want to comment on the video talking about they set a very high threshold of 500 billion above that. Obviously, Bitcoin's the only cryptocurrency or digital asset that reaches that. But it's kind of like one of those things that when they set the monitoring of transactions, anything over $10,000, that was set in the 70s. That was basically equivalent in today's dollars, about $75,000 today. So that's very high. Like unless you're buying a luxury car back then, or putting a huge down payment on a house, that's obviously monitored. But basically nowadays that $10,000, I mean, soon it's going to be the cost of chicken, Dom. Like, $10,000 for a 6-pack of chicken breasts. So I think it's only a matter of time. So I think it's funny when governments set things in fiat currencies, not that it changes the incentive, but over time that those thresholds will be breached. Like, I do think, I hate to say it, but like, altcoins aren't going away anytime soon. So like there will be other altcoins in the future when the dollar is devalued so much that breach that 500 billion threshold. And like maybe, it's like good intentions, like, hey, we're on a gold standard. Hey, we're changing the money multiplier. Hey, we're off the gold standard. It's kind of like the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So I do think over time, like, hey, well, we've got Bitcoin, like that's a great asset, but like these ones have performed well, but they haven't really performed well when you compare them to Bitcoin, but they performed well when you compare them to the devaluation of the dollar. So I do think people will get greedy, and greed exposes people's desire to get more and acquire more. And then that's kind of when you get over leveraged, you get blown out, or, you want to stay humble and stack sats, because otherwise you're going to have less Bitcoin than you want at the end. But I don't know. That's just my opinion on it.
No, for sure. You would hope that if you're in New Hampshire, let the state know, please include sound money principles on, the threshold for what the state will hold. And this goes back to that bottom up, right? This is why it's so wild that you'll see states leaping ahead of cities, because if you had a bunch of cities that were holding Bitcoin because of the principles of Bitcoin, scarcity, a decentralized network, right? Then these things would find their way into the legislation and it'd be much more obvious. So definitely new territory, and you hope that they find some principles. When you talk about, you said, Alemo, humbly stacking sats. Let's talk about someone who's humble, but stacking sats with so much ferocity that I don't know if you can call it humble. Let's pull up the post from this morning. You all saw it. Strategy announcing the preferred strike shares, 21 billion. It mentions in there directly, an intention to use a part of that to acquire Bitcoin. That's a lot of Bitcoin. It's a long-term thing. The question is, Alemo, will states and even the United States ever catch up to Strategy? I mean, is it possible?
I mean, they've got a money printer, so it is possible, but like there's a lot of devaluation that comes with that. So, I mean, we're kind of reaching escape velocity. Like there's only like really one company on the S&P 500 index that can really, or maybe two. There's probably Tesla, with Elon just being like, hey, this is what I'm doing. I don't think he does do that. Or basically it's Meta. We've talked about it with Mark Zuckerberg being at the helm still, founder, CEO. I guess Amazon could, but it would take more work, because even though Jeff Bezos, stepped down to step up, he's on the chairman of the board of Amazon. It's less likely because they have a huge operating expense, and, obviously they print money too. But basically the only one that has the majority of the shares still, has control of the board, can make the executive decision like that very quickly is Mark Zuckerberg. And even then, he would just be basically dumping his whole cash deposits into Bitcoin. And I think like that train has sailed because he's like, hey, we're doing AI, we're doing virtual reality, and we're doing like the metaverse. So like that's a lot of R&D and expenses that go into that. So I think he wants to use a lot of that cash to developing out Meta and the metaverse basically. So it would be unlikely unless he says scrap it, we're not doing that, or yeah, we'll have a focus on it, but we're going to use a lot of our cash now to front Bitcoin. So I really think it's very hard to catch Saylor. It's only going to be nation states that print their own currency, but that's at the detriment of their people in the working class. So like I said, you kind of want to have Bitcoin, obviously get your salary, earn your Bitcoin, let the state pump your bags. I think one thing that people, and we've seen in Weimar Germany, when there's a great chart showing the devaluation of the German mark against gold, and over time it's super volatile, so it's going up and down. Yes, it's basically the chart like hockey sticks up to the right, like as it's devaluing, but you don't want to trade this. You want to hold your Bitcoin. Like Dom, you and I know Bitcoin's going to hit 200K, 500K, a million. They'll be like, yo, I bought a house, I bought the Lambo, I did all this, only for it to crash down in valuation. So like, I really think you want to hold on to your Bitcoin. Yeah, you can use it to spend as you need, spend and replace. But like, I definitely think it's better to hold on to it in a long term. Yeah, if you need to use a little bit for life expenses, life happens, but try and hold on to it. And it's not going to be easy. It's very difficult. But yeah, that's just the word of warning to everyone else.
Yeah, it's an old investing principle long before Bitcoin, right? Is you don't move out of a winning asset into one of less or losing value, right? And so if you've learned what you've learned about Bitcoin and you've looked at its history, that's a tough crossroad, right? And I mean, to go, oh, like here's something that's going to outperform Bitcoin. Sure, you can point in the short term of things that have outperformed Bitcoin, but I mean, to make a claim that something will outperform Bitcoin, that takes a lot of moxie. So and you mentioned Amazon. We're talking, we just played a clip earlier from Sean O'Brien, and he was talking about Amazon, right? And how they've battled with Amazon. This is an interesting case about corporate America and unions. Unions are starting to find Bitcoin at a very grassroots level, but when are the larger unions going to realize, hey, if we're going to negotiate with Amazon in 10 years, what if we came to the bargaining table with a larger stockpile of Bitcoin on our balance sheet? Is that not a, negotiating from an advantage point to say we have this thing? And I think it's significant. So lots of incredible stuff there. We're going to move to a very brief proof of workforce update. But again, if you're just joining us, the Sunnyvale Public Safety Officers Association became the first dual agency association to put Bitcoin on the balance sheet. They're an organization of a little over 200 members out of Sunnyvale, California, in Ro Khanna's district. Hopefully Ro Khanna, sends a little repost of support for them, but that's pretty cool. And again, they're the 7th union in the U.S., 4th in California. There are more to come. And Alemo, not trying to like overhype things at all, but we have a busy week at Proof of Workforce. We're going to have another first in the world of unions and Bitcoin being announced this week, probably. And so tune in for that. There's going to be a first there. And, there's just I'm getting a lot of phone calls from unions saying, hey, we really want to learn about Bitcoin and see how it can serve our organization. And they're doing it also while they're not bypassing the self-custody step. And that's a big part of our mission at Proof of Workforce, is to teach organizations about self-custody. We're not saying put a huge stack into self-custody, but don't bypass that key ingredient of Bitcoin. And with that said, Alemo, I know you're going to love this section, which is a new section for us. This week's self-custody rule to live by. This is brought to you by La Rocca's Corner. It's one of San Francisco's oldest neighborhood bars. It is a great place to have a drink and lose your Bitcoin. There's a Bitcoin-friendly bartender named Tim. Go say what's up. And maybe friendly patrons. You'll see how that rolls, but it's a cool spot. And here's the tip rolling off of what we just said for self-custody is, if your organization adopts Bitcoin or you're part of a group that adopts Bitcoin, help them start by learning self-custody. It can be a very small amount, which a lot of these unions are doing. They're taking a very small amount that you can learn about self-custody, right? You don't put your whole stack into something and a tool that you've just used. Last week, Alemo, I said the first time I used a chainsaw to ventilate a roof on a fire wasn't the first time I used a chainsaw. That would be catastrophic, right? That's not the place to do it. Learn self-custody. And while you're at it, help your organization spin up a node. There's tons of great resources out there. BTC Sessions always has a good one on deck for how to spin up a node in a variety of ways. There's tons of resources. Learn today's self-custody tip, whether you're an individual or an organization, is do not pass go until you learn self-custody and see what that feels like holding Bitcoin in your own possession. I know you're a supporter of this, Alemo. Thoughts?
Yeah, no, not your keys, not your coins, not your keys, not your cheese. You know, the age old sayings. Obviously, like I said, it's baby steps. You know, you don't even need to run a node off the rip. You can do a mobile, $100 on a mobile phone for, basically for your keys there. Obviously, that's not something that you want to have the whole stack in or a lot of money in, but a few $100, $1,000, you can just leave it on your phone there, test it out, try it out. But yeah, I think get in. Don't hold IOUs. Talking about retail and workers, look at GameStop in 2021. A lot of people converted over to Bitcoin because of that. Basically, if Wall Street can change the rules and be like, yo, you're not allowed to buy GameStop stock anymore. You can only sell or hold on to it. And then the price cratered, Bitcoin, you don't have anyone that can block you if you held it in self-custody. Obviously, if you have an ETF, if you have MicroStrategy of the stock, if you have anything, like that's not investment advice. But if you hold it on a platform and you don't hold it yourself, they can confiscate it. They can stop you. They can block you. If you hold it yourself, they can't stop you. So that's the power of Bitcoin there.
Yeah, and that does come with some responsibility, right? I mean, Alemo knows I've called him throughout my journey over the years, being like, "Dude, this thing, what's going on?" I'm not a tech guy, and so I'm kind of a boomer at times, and so I'm trying to, I remember putting together a seed signer, having a nervous breakdown, but the journey is worth it. Self-custody is a journey. Not to get into the weeds, because I know we're going to wrap the show up, but I did see some steam, some re-engaged conversation along the lines of the CTV L-Enhance bit proposal. And I know that's, if you're just starting in self-custody and you hear bit proposal and all this stuff, like you're like, I'm out. Here, get me to the ETF. I never want to talk about this again. But you can't do that. You have to learn about Bitcoin, the network. It's the most exciting part. It's something that is more important than the asset value, is the ability to transact on the network peer to peer. We can't forget about that. So learn these things. You don't have to figure it all out in one sitting. Learn self-custody, get comfortable, take a month if you need, take a few months, but you'll be surprised at the progress you can make. So that's your self-custody tip. Alemo, so pumped that you got to join us. We weren't expecting you today, but I mean, this is coast to coast, Jersey, East Coast, West Coast. And that is all for today from Proof of Workforce. We're putting signal over subs, but do sub this week. We'll have more information coming at you. And remember, as we clock out in this long work break that we gave you, if you're going to trade your time for money, make sure your money holds up over time. And that's not just short term. Look at the big picture, zoom out, learn about money, and learn about Bitcoin. Thank you guys for joining. We will be cranking all week with more updates.